LeBron James tweets that black people are afraid to leave their homes, when in fact it is rare for a white person to kill a black person anytime. It is rare. There are about 20,000 homicides every year. Most homicide is same-race homicide. Most blacks who are murdered by other blacks. Most whites who are murdered by other whites. However, every year there are roughly 750 interracial black-white homicides. 500 white people killed by blacks, even though blacks are just 13% of the population. 250 whites killed by blacks, even though 250 blacks killed by whites, even though whites are 60% of the population. It is very, very rare for it to happen. That's homicide. Let's talk about violent crime between blacks and whites, roughly 600,000 such instances every year. By that I'm talking about attempted murder, manslaughter, rape, assault with a weapon, aggravated assault. 600,000 every single year. 85 to 90% is a black perp white victim, only 10% the other way around. So if anybody has a grievance, it ought to be white people. Because the numbers overwhelmingly show that they are more likely to be victims of crime by black people than the other.
But here's the real grievance. It is white people who hate white people. So why
or feel guilty or who knows?
We would describe it as out-group preference. This was the survey that went viral several years ago. White liberals are the only demographic with a racial out-group preference. So so black people have a slight bias towards black people, Latinos towards Latinos, Asians towards Asians, white conservatives towards white people, liberals against white people. So I don't think the issue actually is that they have a grievance about white on black crime. I think that white liberals generally just don't like white people. And so if anything interrupts their narrative about white people, that's when they go on the offensive. So for example, Asians don't fit the narrative of white privilege. So Asians don't get included in their benefits package of how we got to help minorities.
Right.
So it's really just white people are bad. Have a nice day.
Well, I phrased it somewhat differently. I said, whoever said compound interest is the greatest force in the universe, and by the way, I checked, it wasn't Einstein who said it. Whoever said compound interest is the greatest force in the universe never encountered white guilt. I just think there's a whole bunch of white people that feel really, really bad about slavery, really, really bad about Jim Crow, really, really bad about how black people used to be treated, and this is their way of making up.
I hear you, and I can understand that, but I kind of think they're just white supremacists, and I mean that in the literal sense. We saw that Yale study we love to cite where white liberals speak down to black people and white conservatives don't. White conservatives meet a black guy, they talk to him like normal. White liberals, they dumb themselves down.
What up?
But not even that. They use second grade vocabulary. Like these people, in my mind, I don't think they have white guilt. I think they have a white superiority complex where they imagine them going like, well, we're so much better than they are. They need our help. But I'll give you a quick example.
It's white man's burden.
Right. So I met these activists when I was in North Dakota at the No Dakota Access Pipeline protest. And I'm there to document stuff. But of course, it's all leftist protesters who are very, woke. And I'm sitting down for dinner because I friends of friends. And we get into a conversation. This one guy brings up, so what happens is I said, I got to leave tomorrow because I have to drive to California. I have a meeting at 9 in the morning in 3 days. So I got to drive overnight. And he said, and he smirks and says, a meeting at 9 a.m.? He's like, that's colonial thinking. And I asked him, what is colonial thinking? What I have a meeting? And he's like, it's colonial thinking, dude. Like having a schedule to wake up. You think the Native Americans do that? They wake up when they need to wake up. They wake up when the sun comes up. And I was like, white people didn't invent time or scheduling, dude. And he was like, yeah, they did. It was the colonists who brought all that stuff. And I was like, bro, people in Asia have time and can track the hours of the day and decide we should meet at a certain point of the day. And he goes, no, it was white people who brought that. And I was like, my dude, the Chinese invented compasses 1,000 years before you did. And he goes, no, it's white Europeans who brought all that stuff to China. And I'm like, holy crap, this guy literally thinks white Europeans invented everything, developed science and technology, and then exported that to Asia. And I'm like, it's just true. China invented compasses 1,000 years before Europeans did. I don't hold that against I don't say, wow, Asia, you're so great, or Europe, you're so dumb. It's just a thing that happened. But these people believe white people invented everything. They're just white supremacists.
They invented it to oppress other people. That's the other part. To benefit themselves and to make it harder for everyone else to exist.
They make the compass to control direction. So that,
Yes.
They invented racism.
They invented gravity to keep us all down. I mean, like, white people are out of control.
Okay, well, that's a joke, but like when it comes to like racism, they have part of the theory is white people created racism in order to oppress other races.
Have you seen that video that Ami Horowitz did regarding voter ID?
Oh, it's a classic.
Oh my!
They ask all these college students, why is it that black people can't get voter ID? Well, they don't have access to the internet. So he goes he goes to Harlem.
He says, he asks them, do you think a black person would not be able to get an ID or whatever? And they all say,
yeah, they said no.
They couldn't.
Yeah, they couldn't. They don't have access to computers.
Unreal.
So they can't find the DMV.
So they go to Harlem. Do you have a ID? Yeah, I got ID. You know what the DMV is? Of course I do. Do you know anybody who has? I don't know anybody who doesn't have ID.
My favorite. I have to bring up my favorite. My favorite is one of the excuses the Berkeley kids give is they have trouble finding the DMV.
Right.
And so he meets this like older black guy and he's like, "Can I ask you a question?" He's like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Do you know where the DMV is?" And he goes, "Oh yeah, just go up here on 25th." right. He's giving him directions like it's a normal question.
That's the thing. It's like,
and one woman was told that a lot of people don't think you can get ID.
Yeah.
And she said, "Who thinks that?" And he said, "You think it's racist?" She said, "Yeah, kind of."
there's this thing that goes on in like the critical social justice movement and stuff is they want to think about their blackness first. And it's like they forget that they're people. It's like these are normal people things to do. Finding out where in the city a building is not some massive challenge. The idea that a whole entire race can't find an address.
Well, look.
It's so offensive.
I think about what these Berkeley kids must think of the average intellect of a black person who can't figure out what a building is a few blocks away. I mean, it's a white supremacist idea. And people could not find a building.
I'm on the campaign. I announced before Tim Scott did. Tim Scott announces. I get a phone call from a reporter. You and Tim Scott are both black Republicans. What distinguishes you from Tim Scott? I said in 2016 when Donald Trump announced it, you say, you are both white Republicans. What distinguishes you from Jeb Bush? And she was quiet for 15 seconds. She said, "Point made."
But she's not sorry she asked.
Right,
she said point made, but she's going to ask it again.
Well, she withdrew the question, so I didn't.
I mean,
what distinguishes you from Tim Scott?
I would have trolled her relentlessly. Like, I would have just started.
I said I'm better looking.
No, I mean, I would have just started. I would just say a bunch of self-deprecating racist things. Like, is that what you wanted to hear?
It's ridiculous.
No, it's crazy, but I do think that they ultimately race as at the forefront of a progressive mind always. And they are always, because they are all, I think whether it's they hate themselves because they're
by design.
It's whatever it is, they ultimately use that to say, well, everything I've heard that is a stereotype about another race that could potentially be perceived negatively, I have to make sure I'm on guard against it at all times. Which is way worse.
What you're describing is the result of people being taught critical race theory. Critical race theory in and of itself is not ideas. Critical race theory is a way to approach the world. It is seeing race before anything else. So when we were arguing, we don't want to teach kids critical race theory, we weren't arguing, you don't want kids to know history or know that there are different types of people, different colored people in America, or whatever. It is, we don't want people to have the illiberal view that race comes before the human being.
I gotta read this super chat from Jason Hutchison because he makes a really good point. Black people work at the DMV.
But they get lost all the time.
Dude, these Berkeley college kids are like that racist.
If you're black and you get hired at the DMV, you have to ask for directions every day.
I make this point in my book. I was in Boston in 2004 when this guy with funny ears, skinny guy, whose name nobody could pronounce, came out and gave the intro speech for John Kerry. And Barack Obama said, there's no blue America, there's no red America, people went nuts. There's no black America, there's no white America, people went nuts. He decided to run for president. He's on 60 Minutes. He was not yet the front runner, but he's catching Hillary. And the correspondent said, "Senator, if you don't win, will it be because of race?" And I sat back and I said, let's see what this guy says. He's going to give some sort of victocrat answer the way Al Sharpton did when he ran and lost and claimed it was racism, or Jesse Jackson ran twice and lost and said it was racism. Senator Obama said, no. If I don't win, it will be because I have not articulated a view that the American people can embrace. He also gave a speech at a black church when he was running. He talked about how much racism he thought was still in America. And he said, the Moses generation, referring to the generation of Martin Luther King, the Moses generation has gotten us 90% of the way there. Wow. My generation, the Joshua generation, has to get us that additional 10%, which I thought Phil was reasonable because there was a Fox opinion poll, 2002. 8% of Americans believe Elvis is still alive. 6% believe if you send him a letter, he'll get it. So it's 8% you got to wipe out. So basically what he was saying, we have 2% to work on. He gets elected. Both polls show that blacks and whites thought race relations would improve. When he left, both blacks and whites thought they got worse. Why? Yeah. For 8 years, this dude played the race card time and time and time again. From the Cambridge Police acted stupidly, Trayvon Martin, he invoked Black Lives Matter. He talked about Ferguson at a UN speech. Gave an interview to a podcaster and said, racism is in America's DNA.
So,
this is what communists do.
And then he brought in Al Sharpton over 70 times. What happened to the guy that I saw in Boston?
Yeah.
That's what communists do. Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.